Picture this. A midnight deck, a rock-hard biscuit crawling with worms. Next to it, rotting fish and a cup of green water. Pirates loved gold, but their dinners? Pure nightmares. Today, the 10 most disgusting pirate foods. When we think of pirates, we imagine treasure maps, black flags fluttering in the wind, and daring battles on the high seas. But behind the legends and the adventure was a reality far darker. Life at sea was brutal, filthy, and merciless. And nothing reveals that reality better than what pirates had to eat. Forget fine tavern feasts or tropical banquets. A pirate's daily diet was more like a punishment, a cruel reminder that survival came before comfort. For weeks, sometimes months, these men had no access to fresh supplies. They had to rely on whatever food could endure the endless waves, heat, and dampness of the ocean. And most of it was revolting. From bug-infested biscuits to decayed meat, from rat stew to tales of cannibalism in desperate times, the pirate table was as much a horror story as any naval battle. To survive, pirates had to stomach things most of us today would never even dare to touch. And so, let's begin our countdown of the top 10 most disgusting things pirates ate. 10. Worm-infested ship's biscuit. At number 10, we have the infamous ship's biscuit, also known as hardtack. Calling it a biscuit is generous. It was closer to a piece of concrete than food. Made of flour, water, and a pinch of salt, it was baked until it was as hard as stone, designed to last for months, even years, without rotting. Sounds practical, right? Except that by the time pirates actually ate them, these biscuits were often infested with weevils, maggots, and worms. Imagine biting into something so tough it could break your teeth, only to feel tiny creatures wriggling inside. Sailors even had a nickname for them: maggot bread. The bugs would lay eggs in the flour before baking, and after weeks at sea, the biscuits would come alive with squirming larvae. Pirates had a few tricks to cope. Some would dip the biscuit in seawater or rum to soften it. Others would leave it in the sun, hoping the heat would drive the worms out. But most of the time, they just closed their eyes, pretended not to notice, and crunched down on both bread and bugs. Alike oddities from the age of sail describe men cracking the biscuit with the butt of a pistol or slicing it with a cutlass before eating, because it was simply too hard for human teeth. Some pirates even joked that eating ship's biscuit was a test of manhood, not just because of the stone-like texture, but because of the writhing passengers inside. Now, picture this. You've been sailing for weeks. Your stomach is empty, and the only thing on the menu is a moldy, worm-filled brick. Would you eat it? Pirates had no choice. To them, hunger was worse than disgust. And so, day after day, ship's biscuit remained the staple food of the seas. No matter how foul it became, this was just the beginning of a pirate's culinary nightmare. If you thought wormy bread was bad, wait until you see what came next. Ease 8. 9. Rotten meat and salted fish. If ship's biscuit was the backbone of a pirate's diet, then salted meat and fish were its rancid heart. At first glance, dried beef or salted cod sounds practical. Pack it into barrels, soak it in salt, and it should last the voyage. But the cruel truth of life at sea was that no matter how much salt they used, meat and fish always lost the battle against time, heat, and moisture. Within weeks, the barrels began to leak a stench so powerful that even hardened pirates gagged. As they pried them open, the beef turned slimy, coated with layers of fat and mold. Salted fish grew soft and rank, attracting flies the moment the barrel lid was lifted. And remember, these meals weren't occasional. They were daily rations. Imagine standing on the swaying deck of a ship, the ocean roaring around you, and being handed a hunk of meat so foul it shines with greenish slime. Pirates often joked that they could smell their dinner long before they saw it. But hunger was a cruel master, and the men forced themselves to chew on the revolting flesh, Some pirates tried to mask the taste. They would boil the meat, hoping the seawater would wash away the rot. Others would drown the fish in rum before eating, trading one evil for another. Still, nothing could erase the nauseating reality. This was food on the edge of decay, barely recognizable as meat, and sometimes it went beyond disgusting. It was dangerous. Food poisoning was a constant threat. Sailors collapsed with cramps, fever, and diarrhea after eating spoiled rations, and in the middle of the ocean, medical help was little more than a prayer. A rotten meal could kill a man as surely as a musket ball. There's even a story from the Royal Navy, likely experienced by pirates as well, of barrels so rotten that when opened, only bones floated in a foul, jelly-like soup. The flesh had melted away, leaving nothing but the skeleton of what once was beef. Yet desperate men still tried to eat it, scooping out the mush for a taste of protein. For pirates, there was no feast without risk. Every bite of salted meat or fish was a gamble. Would it keep you alive, or would it lay you low in sickness? And yet they kept chewing, because in the endless blue of the ocean, there were no markets, no fresh farms, no second chances. Rotten meat and fish weren't a rare punishment. They were the daily bread of pirate life. And if you thought that was horrifying, remember, this was still one of the better meals. What lies higher on our list makes spoiled beef look almost appetizing. 8. Foul water, beer, and rum. If the food was bad, the drinks were often worse. Fresh water was a luxury that pirates rarely enjoyed for long. At the start of a voyage, barrels of clean water were hauled aboard. But on the sweltering decks of a ship, exposed to heat and constant movement, it didn't stay fresh. Within a few weeks, the barrels grew slimy, coated with algae, and the water took on a foul, sour taste. Pirates wrote about dipping a cup into the barrel and pulling up water. So green, it looked more like swamp sludge than something to drink. Worms, mosquito larvae, and even small eels sometimes appeared in the barrels, thriving in the stagnant liquid. The smell alone could make a man gag, but thirst was stronger than disgust. And so, pirates drank it anyway, holding their noses, and praying they wouldn't vomit it back up to make things more bearable. Alcohol was the answer, or at least the illusion of one. Beer was often loaded aboard in the hope that it would last longer than water. But beer, too, spoiled quickly in the heat. It turned sour, tasting more like vinegar than ale. Pirates still drank it, because a sour brew was better than deadly. Thirst, and then, of course, there was rum, the pirate's infamous companion. Unlike water and beer, rum didn't rot. It was strong enough to kill most bacteria and could sit in barrels for months without spoiling. For this reason, pirates mixed rum with their foul water, creating a disgusting but drinkable concoction. The mixture, often called grog, was a staple at sea, but grog was no refreshing cocktail. Imagine swampy, green water blended with cheap, burning rum. Every sip was a punishment, not a pleasure. Yet it dulled hunger, masked the stench, and numbed the mind. For many pirates, rum was more than survival. It was escape. After days of rotten meat and wormy biscuits, a swig of grog offered a brief moment of forgetfulness. Even if it came with a pounding hangover the next morning. Still, there was a darker side to this dependence. Too much rum made men reckless, violent, and careless at sea. Many pirate fights, betrayals, and bloody mutinies began at the bottom of a barrel of rum mixed with rotten water. Survival demanded drinking it, but survival also demanded avoiding it. It was a deadly paradox. So picture this: a crew of hardened pirates, their throats parched, lifting a cup of green, slimy water laced with rum. They drink deeply, wincing, coughing, but forcing it down, because there is no other choice. That was the daily reality of pirate life. Foul water was not just disgusting, it was dangerous. Dehydration, dysentery, and fevers haunted crews who relied on contaminated barrels. Some pirates even claimed the water was more deadly than enemy cannon fire. And perhaps, in many cases, it was not. So while the legends speak of rum as the pirates' treasure, the truth is more bitter. Rum was less about celebration and more about survival, a desperate tool to disguise the unbearable taste of rot and filth. And this was only number 8 on our list. If the drinks alone could kill a man's appetite, imagine what horrors the next meals held in store. 7. Rats and other vermin. By the time food supplies rotted beyond recognition and water barrels stank of death, there was another food source crawling all around the ship. Pirates didn't have to look far sometimes. Their next meal had whiskers, a tail, and sharp little teeth. Yes, when desperation set in, pirates turned to rats, mice, and other vermin for survival. At first, rats were considered pests gnawing at ropes, chewing through barrels, and spreading disease. But after weeks at sea, hunger changed perspective. A rat running across the deck was no longer just a nuisance. It was potential dinner. Pirates caught them in traps, hunted them with knives, or even chased them with bare hands. Cooked over a small fire, rat meat was chewy, stringy, and carried a foul smell. Most men claimed it tasted like bitter, greasy leather. Others said it reminded them of burnt chicken if that chicken had been raised in a sewer. Still, hunger is the most powerful seasoning. For starving pirates, the sight of sizzling rat flesh was enough to make mouths water. They roasted them whole, fur, and all burned away in the flames. In some cases, when fire wasn't possible, rats were eaten raw. The thought alone is enough to twist the stomach. But rats weren't the only vermin on the menu. Ships were infested with cockroaches, which thrived in the dark, damp corners of the hold. They crawled into food barrels, spread across sleeping hammocks, and even scuttled into a pirate's beard while he slept. Pirates despised them, but when starvation loomed, some crushed and swallowed them for protein. There are even tales of pirates gnawing on ship's cats during extreme shortages. Cats were brought aboard to hunt the rats, but in the cruelest twist of irony, when both rats and supplies ran out, the hunters became the hunted. To eat a cat was considered shameful, a final proof of desperation, but shame was a luxury no starving man could afford. The horror didn't end there. Some records mention men boiling rat bones into broth, scraping every ounce of nourishment from the creatures. The broth was thin, greasy, and reeked of decay, but it was better than nothing. Others made a stew out of vermin, mixed with whatever rotten biscuit or spoiled fish they could find. Of course, eating rats came with risks beyond disgust. Rats carried fleas, lice, and disease. The Black Death itself had spread through rat populations. Centuries earlier, and though pirates may not have understood germs, they knew illness often followed such meals. Many who ate rats ended up with fevers, sores, and worse. But when your belly clawed with hunger, the future seemed far away. Imagine a pirate crew, once fierce and proud, reduced to crouching on the deck, roasting rats over scraps of firewood, sharing tiny bites of flesh with hollow eyes. It was survival in its most brutal, humiliating form. Yet, as foul as it was, rat meat kept men alive long enough to keep sailing, fighting, and chasing the next treasure. And if you thought rat stew was the lowest point, you might be surprised, because what comes next on our list makes even vermin seem like a delicacy. 6. Moldy cheese and rancid fat. Cheese and fat might sound like comfort food today, but for pirates, they were anything but. Stored for months in damp wooden barrels, exposed to salty air and shifting temperatures, these once edible provisions transformed into grotesque shadows of themselves. The cheese, often hard and salted, began its journey as a decent source of protein. But time was cruel. After weeks at sea, The blocks of cheese turned slimy, their surfaces coated in thick layers of mold green, black, and even orange fuzz that spread like wildfire. Some cheeses reeked of ammonia, others of rot, and all of them clung to the air. Like a curse, pirates didn't throw it away, though. They scraped off the mold with knives, pretending the inside was safe. But the taste betrayed the lie. Sour, bitter, and stomach gash turning dot. Then there was the fat, particularly salt pork and suet stored in barrels. Fat was supposed to be a reliable source of energy, but on a pirate ship it often spoiled into a yellow, rancid paste that smelled like rotting corpses. The stench alone was enough to make strong men gag. Imagine the smell of sour milk mixed with death, and you have rancid fat, but hunger leaves no room for disgust. Pirates still ate it, smearing rancid grease on their wormy biscuits or frying rotten fish in it to disguise the stench. The result? Meals that tasted like a mouthful of rot, with a greasy film that clung to lips and teeth. Some accounts describe pirates eating cheese so riddled with maggots that the insects wriggled out with every slice. Instead of discarding it, they laughed bitterly, calling it moving cheese. And in a strange, grim way, the maggots were extra protein. It was survival logic. Better to swallow a living creature than starve. The psychological toll was enormous. Food is supposed to bring comfort. But for pirates, every meal was a battle between gagging and swallowing. Imagine sitting in the dim galley of a pirate ship, holding a piece of cheese that trembles with life, scraping off mold only to chew something that tastes like poison. And yet, you force it down, because tomorrow might bring nothing at all. Health risks were just as severe as the disgust. Eating rancid fat caused nausea, cramps, and violent diarrhea. Moldy cheese brought fevers, hallucinations, even poisoning. On long voyages, sickness spread quickly, and the pirate diet was often the root cause. But when starvation was the only alternative, risk became irrelevant. One sailor's journal tells of a crew so desperate they mixed rancid pork fat with flour to bake a kind of greasy bread. It was nearly inedible, but the men devoured it, choking and coughing, simply because it was the only thing left. Another account mentions cheese that had hardened into something closer to stone than food. Pirates smashed it with axes, eating crumbs like they were treasures. And so, moldy cheese and rancid fat take their place on this list, not just because they were revolting, but because they symbolize the despair of pirate life. Treasure on one hand, filth on the other. Glory in song, misery at the table. If you thought mold and rot were the peak of disgust, think again. Because the next item on our list involves creatures pulled straight from the ocean depths, raw, slimy, and unforgettable. 5. Slimy sea creatures. Seaweed, shellfish, and raw fish. When food supplies rotted, biscuits crawled with worms, and rats grew scarce, pirates turned to the only resource always within reach, the sea itself. The ocean was their battlefield, their home, and when desperation struck, their kitchen. But the meals it offered were often as foul as anything found in a rotting barrel. One of the most common survival foods was seaweed, drifting green mats, clung to the sides of ships, and pirates hauled them aboard by the handful. Wet, slimy, and reeking of salt and decay, seaweed was chewed raw or boiled into a thin, bitter soup. Pirates compared it to eating wet rope, stringy, tasteless, and full of grit. Some claimed it gave them stomach cramps, but it was better than nothing. In the absence of bread or meat, seaweed became a reluctant staple. Then there were the shellfish mussels, clams and barnacles scraped from the hull of the ship. Pirates pried them loose with knives or bare hands, swallowing them raw when firewood was scarce. These creatures often carried sand, parasites, or the sour taste of rot. Still, they offered a hint of protein. Imagine a pirate squatting on the deck, slurping a slimy clam straight from its shell, wincing as salt water and grit filled his mouth. It was not a feast. It was survival at its most humiliating. Sometimes the ocean delivered worse. Pirates occasionally caught fish that had already started to spoil, their flesh soft and stinking. Instead of throwing them back, the men gutted them and ate them raw. Descriptions of this practice are enough to make the stomach turn. Pirates, chewing on half-rotten fish, scales sticking to their lips, blood and slime dripping down their chins. Sharks were also on the menu when luck allowed. But shark meat was tough, greasy, and foul-smelling. Worse, without proper preparation, it could be toxic. Pirates often boiled it in seawater, producing a rancid, salty broth that left an aftertaste of ammonia. Still, starving men tore into it. Ignoring the nausea, it caused dock barnacles, in particular, were a pirate's curse and salvation. These hard, sharp-shelled creatures clung to the hull, and pirates chipped them off with knives. Eating them raw was like chewing gravel coated in seawater slime. Some pirates broke their teeth trying to bite through the shells. Yet, in moments of desperation, even barnacles became a meal. The ocean's gifts were unpredictable. Sometimes a haul of shellfish kept men alive for days. Other times it poisoned them, leaving entire crews vomiting and writhing in pain. Pirates had no knowledge of food safety. If it moved, they ate it. If it didn't move, they ate it anyway. The imagery is haunting. Tough, battle-hardened pirates crouched over a pile of slimy seaweed, gnawing at raw clams, chewing on foul fish straight from the sea. These were men who dreamed of treasure, power, and freedom, yet hunger humbled them into scavengers, scraping the bottom of the ocean for scraps. And yet, as revolting as seaweed and raw shellfish might sound, they were still natural food. What comes next on our list takes us even deeper into the horrors of pirate life, because sometimes the greatest disgust came not from the sea, but from the pirates themselves. 4. Blood mixtures and disgusting pirate drinks. When water turned green and beer soured beyond recognition, pirates resorted to desperate measures. Their solution? Creating foul, improvised drinks that blurred the line between nourishment and pure madness. Among the worst of these concoctions were mixtures that included animal blood, rum, and seawater liquids so vile that even hardened sailors gagged as they swallowed them. On long voyages, when barrels of water had spoiled, pirates sometimes bled the animals kept on board goats, pigs, or even turtles. They collected the warm blood, mixing it with rum to mask the metallic taste. The result was a sickly, salty brew that clung to the throat like poison. Pirates called it a bloody draught, and though it kept them alive for another day, it often made them ill. Some vomited immediately, others suffered fevers afterward. But in the middle of the ocean, there was no alternative. Even worse were the rum experiments. Pirates valued rum above almost anything else, but when mixed with rotten water, spoiled fruit, or rancid fat, it became an abomination. Some crews made grog with whatever they had, sometimes including vinegar, spoiled citrus, or even gunpowder. Yes, gunpowder. Sailors believed gunpowder gave strength, so a few brave or foolish pirates swallowed burning, bitter gunpowder. Rum that tore at their throats and left them retching. The taste was described as fire and filth combined. The burn of cheap rum, the sourness of rotten citrus, and the grit of black powder scraping down the throat. Yet pirates toasted with it, grimacing, because it dulled hunger and numbed despair. Another grotesque drink was made from fermented scraps bits of biscuit, rotten fruit, and sugar mashed together in a barrel until it bubbled with foam. Pirates drank the sour, frothy slime as a last resort. It was essentially prison-brewed alcohol at sea, and it carried the same dangers. Poisoning, blindness, and madness. The psychological effect of these drinks was just as severe as the physical. Imagine sitting in the galley, holding a cup of dark, foul liquid, knowing it's mixed with pig's blood or rotten water, and forcing it down while your crewmates cheer, pretending it's a feast. Survival became a ritual of humiliation. Drink first, think later. Some records even describe pirates drinking seawater when all else failed. At first, it quenched thirst. But soon after, the salt poisoned their bodies, causing swelling, delirium, and death. Thirst drove men insane, and insanity drove them to drink the very water that killed them not. It's hard to picture these legendary figures of freedom, and defiance men like Blackbeard or Calico Jack, reduced to choking on blood rum or gnawing on moldy biscuits. Yet this was the reality of the sea. Treasure was rare, but filth was constant. These grotesque drinks weren't a luxury, they were survival. They reveal the brutal truth. Pirates lived on the edge, not just in battle, but in every meal, every drink, every swallow. The ocean didn't just test their courage, it tested their stomachs. And as vile as blood drinks and rung slime were, our list is not finished. Because the closer we sail to the top, the more terrifying the meals become, culminating in the darkest, most desperate act of all elves. 3. Insects and crawling protein. Cockroaches, weevils, and maggots. If pirates thought wormy biscuits and slimy seaweed were bad, nothing could compare to the constant plague of insects that infested every corner of their ships. These weren't just pests, they were an unavoidable part of the pirate diet. Sometimes by accident, sometimes by necessity, pirates ended up swallowing far more legs and wings than they cared to admit. The most infamous invader was the weevil. These tiny beetles thrived in ship's biscuits, chewing tunnels through the already rock-hard bread. By the time a pirate bit into his ration, the biscuit often crumbled into dust, wriggling with black specks. Some men tried to shake the weevils out, holding their bread over the side of the ship so the insects would fall into the sea. Others simply crushed them into the biscuit and ate everything together. Extra protein, they joked bitterly. Then there were the cockroaches. A pirate ship was a paradise for them, dark, damp, full of rotting food. They bred by the thousands, filling the holds, crawling across hammocks at night, even nesting in the pirates' beards. Their stink was unbearable, a greasy, musty smell that clung to everything they touched. Pirates hated them with a passion, yet in times of desperation, some crews crushed and roasted cockroaches, claiming they tasted nutty. Imagine chewing on a bitter, crunchy shell, only to feel the oily aftertaste coating your tongue. The most revolting of all, however, were the maggots. These pale, writhing larvae appeared in every spoiled ration, from meat to cheese to biscuits. Pirates sometimes pretended not to see them, swallowing food alive rather than face starvation. Others scooped them out and ate them separately, believing they were at least fresh. In the darkest tales, pirates even bred maggots on purpose, leaving meat to rot so the larvae could be harvested as a new food supply. The thought of it alone is enough to twist the stomach. Insects were everywhere. They hid in the seams of barrels, floated in water, even scuttled over sleeping men. Pirates awoke to cockroaches crawling across their faces, maggots falling from beams above, and weevils crunching between their teeth. And no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't escape them. But here's the brutal truth. These insects probably saved lives. As revolting as it sounds, bugs provided protein when meat was gone, and the ocean offered nothing. Modern science even confirms that maggots and beetles are calorie-rich. Pirates may not have known it, but their disgusting meals kept them alive long enough to raid another ship. Still, survival didn't erase the humiliation. Imagine legendary figures, men like Blackbeard or Charles Vane, sitting at a wooden table, splitting open a biscuit and watching a wave of tiny beetles crawl out. And instead of throwing it away, they sigh, crush the insects with their knives, and eat it all. That was pirate life, Glory in battle, filth at supper. Insects weren't just a nuisance. They were a curse that followed every voyage. And yet, compared to what awaits higher on our list, even a mouthful of cockroaches might seem bearable. Because the next horrors take us to the very edge of human survival, where desperation pushed pirates into darkness far beyond disgustorate act. Of all elves. 2. Cannibalistic tailies. Of all the horrors that pirates endured at sea, none is darker than the whispered tailies of cannibalism. It was not common, nor was it something men spoke of freely. But in the most desperate times, when the ship was stranded, food was gone, and men faced death by starvation. There are chilling accounts of crews turning on their own. History tells us of shipwrecked sailors drawing lots. The unlucky loser sacrificed so the others could live. Pirates, too, faced the same temptation. Imagine weeks adrift, the sun burning overhead, the sea offering no fish, and your belly hollow as a drum. At that moment, the line between man and meat blurred. One infamous tale comes from a group of buccaneers stranded in the Caribbean. After exhausting their rotten rations, they hunted sea turtles and drank rainwater, but it wasn't enough. Soon, whispers spread across the starving crew. Eventually, they killed the weakest man among them, roasting his flesh over a fire built from splintered wood. Survivors later confessed the truth in hushed tones, ashamed but alive. These cannibalistic acts were rarely recorded in pirate logs, for obvious reasons. But sailors' rumors spread fast, and among the legends of treasure and adventure, darker stories of men eating men were whispered in taverns. For many, it was proof that life at sea stripped away civilization until only raw survival remained. Cannibalism was not just physical horror, it was psychological torment. Those who took part carried the memory forever. Some refused to speak of it, haunted by guilt. Others justified it, claiming the dead man sacrificed himself for the crew. Either way, the shame was burned into pirate lore. It's a chilling reminder. Pirates weren't just fighting the Navy or rival crews, they were fighting hunger itself. And when hunger won, humanity was the price. 1. The most horrifying pirate meal if cannibalism represents the darkest act, then the single most horrifying meal ever described by pirates combines every nightmare from this list into one. Survivors' journals tell of meals so revolting that the men themselves recoiled in disbelief. Picture this: a stew made from the last scraps of food on board. Into the pot went worm-infested biscuits, moldy cheese, rancid fat scraped from barrels, and rotten fish caught from the sea. Desperate pirates tossed in rats, cockroaches, and even maggots scraped from meat. To disguise the stench, they mixed it with seawater and rum. The result was a bubbling, greasy sludge that smelled like death itself. Some called it hell broth. Others named it the pirate stew of despair. Whatever the name, it was the bottom of survival. Pirates gagged as they swallowed it, holding their noses, forcing the slime down their throats. Men vomited after eating it, only to scoop up another bowl because hunger gave them no mercy. One account from a French privateer describes such a meal in detail. The crew gathered around a pot of boiling sludge, each man silent, ashamed, and desperate. When the stew was ladled out, it writhed with maggots, the surface crawling as if alive. Still, the men ate, because death by disgust was better than death by starvation. This ultimate pirate meal wasn't just disgusting, it symbolized the collapse of order and dignity. Pirates prided themselves on defiance, on living free, on challenging kings and empires. Yet here, at the edge of the world, they were reduced to animals, consuming filth just to live another day. And so our list ends, not with gold, but with horror. From wormy biscuits and rotten fish, to rats, cockroaches, and maggot-filled cheese, pirates endured a daily battle, not only with enemies at sea, but with their own stomachs. Their lives were legendary, but their meals were nightmares. The next time you hear the romantic tales of treasure maps and buried gold, remember the other side of the story. Pirates choking on mold, drinking blood mixed with rum, and in the darkest hours, turning on each other. They were men who laughed at cannon fire, who raised the black flag without fear, but when it came to supper, even the bravest pirate could tremble. So I ask you, if you had sailed alongside them, which of these horrors? Could you stomach? Could you chew the wormy biscuit? Swallow the rancid stew? Or would you rather face the hangman's noose on land than the pirate's table at sea? Because in the end, the ocean didn't just test courage. It tested humanity.